This avalanche safety report is brought to you by Mountain TV. Learn more at mtn-tv.com.
I'm Shannon Lukens with Mountain TV, and joining me every week is Brian Lazar, Deputy Director for Colorado Avalanche Information Center. Hi, Brian. How's it
Hi,
looking
how
out
you
there?
doing?
Good.
Well, we had quite the return of winter weather, and it was not subtle. So I want to start by just showing what this looks like statewide. This first image here is the statewide snow water equivalent, and this black line is our current year. The green line, just in the background, is what we would see on an average or median year. And our pattern of getting these big snowstorms right during the holiday weekends continued. You can see our first major uptick here on the left happened right around Thanksgiving. Our next major uptick between Christmas and the New Year's. And then finally, this Valentine's Day to President's Day storm, which added a lot of snow to most mountain areas and brought our statewide average back to 95% of long-term median. So we're not quite back where we need to be, but it did help quite a bit. And if we look at this on a basin scale, you can see that we do have quite a bit of a gradient. More snow fell in the northern mountains because snow continued into the early part of this work week. And those led to the most dangerous avalanche conditions as we move through the latter part of the work week, especially the Summit County, kind of through the northern Front Range area. The Central Mountains did a little bit, did well as well, but not quite as much snow, and it didn't last as long as in the northern mountains. So we still have dangerous avalanche conditions in the Central Mountains, but not quite as pronounced as in the northern mountains. And then this gradient continues into the southern mountains where the snowfall ended the earliest and they didn't get quite as much. And you can see they're still trailing behind long-term median. Those are the areas that are going to have more stable snow earlier in the stabilization cycle. But I do want to see that we do have continued snowfall, no big giant storms like what we saw over the holiday weekend, but a little bit of snowfall here and there throughout the work week, with kind of the biggest pulse of snow coming on Thursday and Thursday night, as you can see here. This will continue to add fuel for wind drifted snow, and it's going to be those wind drifted slopes at the higher elevations, particularly in thin rocky areas, that remain the most dangerous. I do want to show what some of this avalanche activity looked like, because the avalanches have grown quite large, particularly in the areas that picked up a ton of storm snow. And you can see just how deep and how wide some of these are breaking, some of them breaking into deeper weak layers near the ground. Here's a good example on Whetstone Mountain near Crested Butte. Here's an example of an explosive triggered avalanche down in the San Juan Mountains, just in the storm snow alone. And you can see if you end up getting, taken for a ride in something like this, how dangerous it could be. So while the natural cycle of avalanches is largely waning in most areas, the last place to stabilize will be in those northern mountains. A lot of slopes do remain ripe for human triggered avalanches. And so here's an example of how big these things can go. So just because the natural cycle is over does not mean dangerous avalanche conditions are in the rearview mirror yet. Here's another one in Maroon Creek up in near Aspen. And then lastly, just a couple days ago, a snowmobiler triggered this fairly sizable avalanche up near Vail Pass on Shrine Mountain. This snowmobiler was caught and buried for an hour, but miraculously was found alive. So a very close call. And so these are just really indicative of the kinds of avalanches we're going to be able to continue to trigger through the work week. You may not see signs of obvious instability like shooting cracks or big whooping collapses. So we just need to really dial in the terrain choices and give the snowpack time to adjust to this really heavy load that it just experienced. Our most dangerous slopes have expanded, as you can see here, by our persistent slab avalanche distribution rows. And it's covering, a large swath of the compass, from west wrapping around the north all the way to southeast facing slopes. And again, you may not see those signs of obvious instability before you trigger what could be a very large avalanche. So southerly facing slopes, particularly at the lower elevations, do offer some safer terrain choices as we move through the work week.
So,
I
Brian,
do.
we are expecting warmer weather. How is that going to affect the avalanche danger for this coming weekend?
Yeah, and that'll really change the flavor of avalanches that we're going to see. And so, as you noted here, I'm running temperatures at 2 meters just off the ground here. And you can see by the time we get into Saturday, those warmer colors start to show up on the map. Warmer temperatures, a return of ample sunshine starting Saturday and lasting into the early part of next work week. means a return of wet avalanche activity. That's going to be a lot of fresh snow. That's going to see the sun and the warm temperatures for the first time, and we can expect a fairly widespread shed cycle, which will probably start in the southern mountains and progress its way north. So you can expect wet avalanches like these to return to the radar, which means a very dynamic switch as we head into the weekend. So it's important to check your forecast because the flavor of avalanches are going to change, and a lot of wet avalanche activity is expected through the weekend and into early next week.
Well, thank you, Brian. Your graphics are great and your
Oh,
video.
thank
That
you.
is really, really good. So thank
Yeah,
you very much
thank
for
you.
keeping us informed.
You
Oh,
bet. I'll see you next week.
thank you so much, Brian. For more information, go to colorado.gov/avalanche. And we want everyone to stay safe out there.